Since we were born, we learn to hide. We smooth down our edges, stuff our messy parts into closets, and glue on masks. First out of fear, then habit, then because we forget what's underneath. But why? Why do we spend our lives performing, pretending, polishing versions of ourselves that never quite fit? This isn't about faking it. It's deeper. It's about survival. We mask to belong, to be loved, to avoid the terrifying freedom of being truly seen. Think about it. A toddler learns to swap tears for a smile to avoid scolding. A teenager hides his quirks to dodge bullies. An adult swallows his dreams to chase promotions, likes, approval, whatever. The crowd calls success. We're all haunted by the same quiet question. What if who I really am isn't enough? Nietzsche called these masks lies turned inward. But they're not evil. They're armor. The problem? Armor gets heavy. It rusts. It starts to feel like a cage. This journey isn't about ripping off masks in some grand, heroic moment. It's about peeking behind them. Why do we let fear pilot our choices? Why do we trade our wild, weird truths for empty applause? And what happens when we finally stop? We'll wander through the stories we've been told. Be nice, be normal, be better. Dig into the wounds that shaped us, and maybe, just maybe, find the guts to whisper, "Here I am, messy, unfinished, alive." We begin our journey in the shadowed corners of the human soul, where fear, raw, ancient, and inflexible, wears the first mask to our faces. Long before we learn to lie with words, we lie with silence. Long before we craft personas to impress or intimidate, we hide. Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "Every philosophy also conceals a philosophy. Every opinion is also a hiding place. Every word a mask." But what are we hiding from? And why does fear, of all things, become the needle that sews us into these disguises? Imagine a child trembling in the dark. She knows instinctively that crying might summon comfort or provoke anger, so she swallows her tears, learning to twist her face into whatever expression keeps her safe. This is fear's first lesson. To be seen is to be vulnerable. Over time, the mask hardens. It becomes a second skin, a fortress against judgment, rejection, or the terror of not belonging. Psychologists call this attachment conditioning. Philosophers might name it the birth of inauthenticity. But beneath both labels lies the same truth. We wear masks because we are afraid to exist as we are. Nietzsche's The Gay Science whispers a haunting question. How much truth can a spirit bear? For many of us, the answer is not enough. We fear the truths that lurk in our depths, our insecurities, desires, rages. So we bury them, letting fear sculpt a face that is palatable, agreeable, acceptable. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the parts of ourselves we exile to the unconscious. But exile does not quiet, it amplifies. The more we hide, the more the mask cracks under the weight of what it represses. We grow exhausted, fragmented, strangers to ourselves. Yet we cling to the disguise because the alternative, naked exposure, feels like annihilation. Here, the hero's journey begins. The call to adventure is not a roar, but a whisper. What if you took it off? The refusal is immediate. Without the mask, who am I? Without its armor, how will I survive the gazes of others? The fear is primal, visceral. It lives in the amygdala, that ancient neural relic that once warned us of predators and now warns us of rejection. Modern psychology validates this terror. Studies on social exclusion reveal that the brain processes ostracism as physical pain. To unmask is to risk a wound, but Nietzsche urges us onward. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he writes of the Übermensch, the one who transcends the herd, who creates values rather than inheriting them. This is not a call to arrogance, but to sovereignty. To unmask is not to discard fear, but to stare into its hollow eyes and say, "You are not my master." Psychologically, this is exposure therapy, confronting the feared object until it loses its power. Philosophically, it is the act of becoming. The path is treacherous. To remove the mask is to meet the parts of yourself you've disowned. The child who was told she was too much, the dreamer mocked for his naivety, the lover who still aches. This is the dark night of the soul, where the hero falters. But here, in the abyss, a revelation stirs. The mask was never a shield, it was a cage. Fear did not protect you, it imprisoned you. So take a breath, feel the weight of the mask, its grooves, its cracks, the way it clings like a parasite. Now imagine letting it fall. This is the first step, not courage, but curiosity. What if your naked face, flawed, trembling, alive, is not a weakness, but a revolution? The journey has just begun. If fear stitches the first mask, then ambition tightens it. Here, in the theatre of human society, we learn to perform. We polish our roles, rehearse our lines, and measure our worth by the applause of the crowd. The mask of social status is not born of survival like fear's disguise. It is born of hunger. Hunger to matter, to rise, to be seen as more than we believe ourselves to be. Friedrich Nietzsche, ever the provocateur, saw this clearly. The vanity of others offends our taste only when it offends our vanity. But what happens when the mask of status becomes our face? When we forget we are acting at all? Consider the young professional who wears a tailored suit like armor, who laughs a little too loudly at the boss's jokes, who trades weekends and passions for promotions, or the parent who curates a life on social media, shining kitchens, flawless children, while inside, exhaustion bites like a rat in the walls. These are not lies, not exactly. They are aspirations, but aspirations calcify into obligations. We chase titles, followers, the approving nods of strangers, because somewhere along the way, we conflate existing with being acknowledged. Psychologists call this social comparison theory. We define our value by measuring it against others. Philosophers might call it the tyranny of the herd. Nietzsche's On the Genealogy of Morals dissects this hunger. He argues that modern morality itself is a mask, a slave morality born of resentment, where the weak invert values to paint their submission as virtue. Status, then, becomes a proxy for power. But power over what? Over whom? The tragedy is that the higher we climb, the more the mask fuses to our skin. We mistake the persona, the successful one, the admired one, for the self. Carl Jung warned of this peril. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And what is social status, if not a collective agreement to avoid that reckoning? Yet the hero's journey demands we ask, what does this mask cost us? The answer is written in the body, the panic attacks before board meetings, the insomnia that hums through nights spent chasing validation. Studies on burnout and imposter syndrome reveal the toll. The more we perform, the emptier we feel. The mask of status demands blood sacrifice, our authenticity, our joy, our capacity to simply be. We become walking contradictions, envied and lonely, accomplished and numb. But here, Nietzsche offers a lifeline. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he writes of the will to power, not domination over others, but the drive to transcend the self. To unmask, in this context, is not to reject ambition, but to redirect it. Ask yourself, who am I when no one is watching? What do I love when no one is keeping score? This is the dark night of the ego, where the hero confronts the hollowness of external validation. It is terrifying, yes, but terror is the price of truth. Psychologically, this unmasking aligns with self-determination theory, the idea that fulfillment comes not from external rewards, but from autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Philosophically, it echoes the Stoic duty to live in accordance with nature, to align actions with inner values, not societal noise. The mask of status cracks when we stop asking, do they respect me? And start asking, do I respect myself? Imagine the executive who quits to teach, the influencer who deletes their account to paint in silence, the parent who admits, I'm not okay, and finds community in that vulnerability. These are acts of rebellion. They are also acts of homecoming. To shed the mask of status is not to abandon ambition, but to reclaim it. to strive for a life that thrills your soul, not just impresses the crowd. The journey here is paradoxical. The mask of status promises belonging, yet it isolates. It promises worth, yet it devours it. The hero's task is not to destroy the mask, but to see it for what it is, a costume, not a crown. Try this. Stand in front of a mirror and say, "I am enough." Notice how the words claw at the mask. Notice how the mask fights back. This is the second step, not renunciation, but discernment. To wear a mask consciously when necessary is wisdom. To forget you're wearing it is slavery. There are masks we wear for others, and then there are masks we wear for the gods. These are the oldest disguises, woven not from individual fear or ambition, but from the collective breath of civilizations. Sacred lies, the myths, morals, and meanings we cling to, are the most potent masks of all. They tell us why we suffer, who we are, and what we must worship. But what happens when the sacred lie begins to rot? When the stories that once held us together now gag us? Friedrich Nietzsche, who declared God dead long before modernity's disenchantment, understood this rupture. Truths are illusions, which we have forgotten are illusions. Consider the village that prays to a stone idol for rain, pouring wine at its feet as crops wither, or the nation that recites myths of its own righteousness, even as its hands stain with violence. These are not acts of ignorance, but of survival. Sacred lies are the glue of belonging. They answer the unanswerable. Why do we die? Why do we hurt? Psychology calls these cultural narratives. Religion calls them faith. But peel back the dogma, and you'll find a raw, trembling need to make meaning in a meaningless world. The danger arrives when the lie becomes a cage. A mother teaches her daughter that suffering is virtue, that her rage is sin, that her body is an altar for others' desires. A scholar buries his doubts about an ancient text, fearing exile from the tribe that raised him. These are not villains, but prisoners of the sacred. Nietzsche's The Birth of Tragedy reveals the tension at the heart of this. Human beings need both Apollonian order, the lie that structures chaos, and Dionysian truth, the raw, ecstatic void beneath it. But when the balance tips, when the lie demands too much blood, the mask cracks. And what pours out is not chaos, but clarity. Modernity's great sickness is this. We've traded sacred lies for profane ones. We no longer bow to stone idols, but to algorithms, curated feeds that promise belonging if we perform, consume, conform. The lie is subtler now, secular and slick, but the wound is the same. You are not enough as you are. Psychology diagnoses this as existential anxiety. Philosophy names it alienation, yet both agree. We are starving for meaning in a world that sells us plastic sustenance. The hero's journey here is not to destroy the sacred lie, but to see it, to hold it in trembling hands and ask, does this story serve life or devour it? This is the crossroads where Søren Kierkegaard's leap of faith meets Carl Jung's individuation, the choice to either surrender to the collective trance or awaken to the terrible, liberating truth. You must create your own meaning. History whispers examples. Galileo, forced to recant his heliocentric truth, muttering, "And yet it moves," under his breath. The mystic who risks heresy to speak of a God beyond gender, beyond scripture, beyond fear. The modern worker who rejects the cult of productivity, who dares to rest without apology. These acts are not rebellions, they are resurrections. To unmask the sacred lie is to reclaim the right to wonder, to doubt, to breathe. But the cost is loneliness. Sacred lies bind people. They are the campfires around which we huddle. To walk away is to step into the dark. Nietzsche's Zarathustra warns, one must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. This is the paradox. The profane truth, naked, unsettling, unadorned, is the only ground where new sacreds can grow. Not lies, but choices. Not dogma, but devotion. So how do we begin? Start by interrogating your rituals. Why do you kneel? Why do you earn? Why do you apologize for existing? Trace each should back to its root. You'll find fossils of dead gods. fragments of old fears. Then, ask the revolutionary question, what if I made this holy instead? Not the mortgage, but the morning light on your child's face. Not the accolade, but the act of creation itself. Psychology calls this values-based living. The mystics called it prayer. The sacred lie will fight back. It will hiss that you're arrogant, lost, damned. But stand firm. In the rubble of collapsed myths, you'll find the tools to build altars that honor your soul's truth. This is the third step. Not defiance, but reverence for the fragile, fleeting, glorious act of being alive. Beneath the masks we choose lies the one we did not, the unconscious, a silent architect building labyrinths in the dark. This is the shadow realm of the psyche, where forgotten wounds hum lullabies to our fears, where desires pulse like buried rivers, shaping our lives without consent. Here, in this uncharted territory, the most intimate mask clings, the one we wear not for the world, but from ourselves. Nietzsche wrote about this. One's own self is well hidden from one's own self. Of all mines of treasure, one's own is the last to be dug up. So, how do we unmask what we're not meant to see? Imagine a painter who flees blank canvases, her hands steady until they near the brush, then trembling. She calls it perfectionism, not knowing it's the ghost of a childhood scolded for daring to color outside the lines, or the lover, who builds walls of charm and wit, never noticing they're designed to keep others from glimpsing the child inside, who still believes love must be earned. These are not flaws, but unfinished conversations, whispers between the self and the silent self. Freud called the unconscious a cauldron of seething excitations, but Jung saw it as a living cosmos, rich with symbols and stories waiting to be heard. Modern psychology speaks of implicit memory, trauma, or joy etched into neural pathways, steering decisions like invisible reins. Yet all agree, the unconscious is not a dungeon to fear, but a neglected ally. Its masks are forged not from deceit, but protection. They say, don't look here, it's too much. But what if too much is exactly where your freedom hides? The hero's journey here turns inward. The call to adventure is a slip of the tongue, a recurring dream, a sudden rage that surprises even you. The refusal is instinctive. Why dredge up the past? The psyche, like the body, resists surgery, yet the unconscious persists. It hums in your irrational aversions, your inexplicable longings, the song you can't get out of your head. Nietzsche's Zarathustra whispers, in your own soul lie the stars of your fate. To ignore them is to wander half blind. Unmasking begins with curiosity, not courage. Start with the body, the clenched jaw at a colleague's joke, the weight in your chest when praised. These are hieroglyphs of the unconscious, messages carved in flesh. Neuroscience confirms the gut's second brain holds memories the mind has exiled. Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score isn't just a title, it's a map. Follow the tension in your shoulders back to the unspoken no you swallowed years ago. Trace the flutter in your stomach to the hope you buried to avoid disappointment. Then, dialogue. Not with a therapist, though that may help, but with the fragments of self you've disowned. Jungian active imagination invites this. Sit with the child who learned to hide, the adolescent who armored their tenderness, the ancestor whose survival tactics pulse in your DNA. Ask, what do you need me to know? Listen not with the mind, but the marrow. The answers may arrive as images, sensations, tears with no obvious source. This is the unconscious speaking in its mother tongue. Symbol, the revelation. These hidden masks were never enemies. The painter's paralysis protects her from the vulnerability of being seen. The lover's walls guard a heart that once bled too openly. Gratitude softens the unmasking. Thank you for keeping me safe. Now, let me hold you. Integration begins here, in the embrace of exiled selves. But beware, the unconscious resists brute force. It's a wild creature, not a machine. Modern wellness culture's obsession with shadow work often misses this, turning introspection into another, performance. True unmasking is not a task, but a courtship. It's the poet Rilke's advice. Do not now seek the answers. Live the questions now. The reward? A paradoxical homecoming. You'll find the masks you wore, the people pleaser, the stoic, the eternal optimist, were not lies, but bridges. They carried you across rivers of pain until you were ready to swim. Now, you can dismantle the bridge, or honor it as a relic of resilience. Either way, you walk taller, unburdened by the weight of secrets even you forgot you kept. In the end, the unconscious isn't a place to conquer, but to converse with. It's the ocean beneath the iceberg of consciousness, vast and vital. To unmask it is not to fix yourself, but to befriend yourself, to finally meet the stranger you've always been. Here's the secret no one tells you. Masks aren't the enemy. They're just tools. We needed them. That kid who learned to stay quiet at the dinner table, they were protecting you. The version of you that hustles for respect, they got you this far, but tools can outlive their purpose. The moment you realize, I don't need to hide anymore, is the moment the mask starts to crack. This isn't about becoming someone perfect or enlightened. It's about becoming whole, the angry parts, the tender parts, the parts you've been ashamed of. They're not flaws, they're clues. They're the map back to you. Nietzsche said, no one can build you the bridge you need to walk but yourself. So build it, not with more masks, but with curiosity. Why does that old hurt still sting? Why does praise feel like a trap? The work never really ends. Some days you'll wear masks to navigate work, family, a world that still judges. Other days, you'll dare to walk barefaced, heart rattling like a drum. Both are okay. Both are human. The goal isn't to arrive, it's to stop walking through life feeling like a ghost, to look in the mirror and think, oh, there you are. Masks got you here. Now it's your turn to choose. What do you want to carry? What do you want to burn? The rest of your life starts now, not perfect, but yours.